Good morning and namaste to all of you. Let's start our Wednesday class with the prayers. Om Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo, Maheshwaraha, Guru Sakshat Parbrahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Om Bhu Bhuvaswaha, Tatsavitra Vareneyam, Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi, Dhiyo Yo Naha Prachodayat, Asto Ma Satgamya, Tamso Ma Jyotirgamya, Mrityurma Amritam Gamya. ओम सहनावतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सवीर्यं करवावहि तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहि ओम शांति 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 ओम. Yogic philosophy maintains that the soul is immortal and soul transmigrates from life to life in an endless succession. This means that although a person's earthly body will sooner or later decay and die, the soul remains forever, unborn and undying. That's what it means by that eternal word. The immortal soul is reborn after each physical death in an unending series of lifetimes, one after another. In Sanskrit, this ceaseless passage of the soul through the cycles of birth and death is called avagaman. Avagaman means coming and going. According to the philosophy of yoga, the purpose of life is to find release from the wheel of births and deaths by securing moksha, liberation. So that is the goal. Goal is not to just keep coming back again and again. Goal is to attain the moksha. While the soul lives on after the death of the body, this survival after death is merely a temporary respite from life on the earthly plane and not real liberation. Okay, so it's like a soul with the subtle and the causal body has left, physical body is left behind. So it's not a real liberation. After the death of the physical body, the soul retains subconscious impressions, which are called sanskars. Those sanskars are of merits and demerits acquired during previous lifetimes. When the soul is reborn in a new body, the impressions or the innate tendencies remain within the psyche, completely delineating an individual's personality. One's thoughts, attitudes, words, and deeds, whatever enters the subconscious, are etched upon the psyche as impressions and carried to the next lifetimes. The theory of transmigration or rebirth is based on the metaphysical process of action and reaction, which is generally known as law of karma. Whether a future rebirth will be for better or worse compared to one's current lifetime will depend upon the nature of quantity of the rewards and punishments that are due to a person's own account of past karmas. And you all know the karmas are done by our body, physical body. Karmas are done by the mind, and the karmas are done with the words also. It's like it from the sharir and the vachan and the man. The law of karma not only makes us personally responsible for what we do, but also explains individual differences in birth, heredity, environment, circumstances, etc. So in other words, all of this is where we are going to born, or where we were born this time, or what kind of a body we have. Predominantly, it is dependent upon the karmas. From deep within the heart of every living being, there arises the universal compulsion to stay alive. Nobody wants to die. Nobody wants their loved ones to die. No one truly enjoys facing death. That's why often we don't even want to talk about death. In certain societies, it's like a taboo to talk about death. Yet death will come in one way or another, sooner or later. That's why we say as certain as death. When a person dies, having passed beyond the physical body into the vacuum of the intermediate after that state, the conditioned soul, not the Shuddha Buddha Atma I'm talking about, the conditioned, how the soul is conditioned with the subtle and the causal body. That's the conditioning we have done. So the conditioned soul often feels lonely and forlorn. One's immediate reaction to the after-death state is the impulse to become surrounded with company once again. This longing drives one to reach out for a new body at once. This desire for continued existence is the chief cause of the round of births and deaths, and its inseparable sorrows. Because once we take a body, sorrow is attached to it. The craving for existence and the fear of death go hand in hand. These two impulses are ever present among all creatures, not just only human beings, all creatures. If you go to a slaughterhouse, you will hear the cries. Even if there are not cries, you will feel the denseness of that fear. Try to catch a little bug. Even if you are protecting, that there's a fear in bugs' psyche that somebody is going to hurt me. From the most uncomprehending, warm to intelligent human beings, we are all afraid of death. Every creature, even a child, quivers at the thought of death. Even though that little child has not experienced death in the present life. The fear of death is automatically inferred as a result of our subconscious memories of death in the previous lives. That has been etched there. The painful or horrifying death experiences of previous lives percolate up into the consciousness through the impressions during the current life, generating the fear of death and the desire to cling to life. Rishi Patanjali in Yoga Sutras, he said, Swa rasa vahi, vidosha upi tatha rudo abhinivesha. So fear of death is called abhinivesh in Sanskrit. Clinging to life and fear of death is abhinivesh. He said clinging to life due to past experiences exists even in the wise. Okay? Vidosha api. Even the wise people. So that means it's so subtle, it's so strong in us, fear of death. But unless the fear of death is overcome, the desire to cling to the limitations of physical consciousness can never be eradicated. So with the yoga sadhana, we got to overcome this fear of death. Both impulses will remain eternally present until they are simultaneously and gradually reduced through the practice of yoga. And that's what vairagya is. And that's what abhyas is. to get rid of these impulses, clinging to this worldly life and being afraid of the death. Vairagya. Through the practice of yoga, a person can gradually attain everlasting freedom, not only from the limiting psychological impulses and drives, but also from embodied existence itself. That is called moksha, mukti, nirvana. The boundless happiness of the various heavenly realms. And we talked about it last week's class, Wednesday class. There are heavens, there are upper realms. There is a boundless happiness there. But it should never be mistaken for the everlasting freedom and unending supreme bliss of liberation. Because even if you reach to the Brahmaloka, still we'll have to come back. So moksha is when you reach the ultimate, the supreme, the absolute. So that's why for a yoga abhyasi, moksha is the goal, not the heavenly abodes. Whether a person will be reborn on earth or in one of the heavens or hells depends largely upon our karmas in our present lifetime. Because this is the only thing which is in our hands. Sure, we have done the karmas before too, but they are done. Impressions of those karmas are there, but in order to clean it all up, we can do it only now. That's why they say there is a power in now. A virtuous, generous lifestyle can qualify a person for rebirth in a higher sphere. On the other hand, a hateful, selfish life can cause a person descent to a lower sphere or even hell. A mixed balance of positive and negative actions will result in another birth on earth. That's what we talked about last week. Pap and punya mixture, positive and negative mixture on this earth. That's why there's nobody who is 100% sukhi and nobody who's 100% dukhi. It's a mixture. While good deeds in the fullness of time bestow pleasure as their fruit, and negative actions eventually ripen into sorrow. However, neither good nor evil actions are capable of procuring release from the closed cycle of transmigration. Because of the karmas, we got bondaged. So we cannot say that I'm going to do the good karmas and I'm going to find liberation. Because karmas are the cause for bondage. Among those who believe in reincarnation, few purposely seek out the torments of an existence in the realm of the hell. Most prefer to earn rebirth in one of the heavens. We want to go to a better place. The upper realms, not the lower. Compared to life on earth, which is a bittersweet blend of joy and sorrow. So we don't want sorrow, we want happiness. And we know that happiness is only in the upper realms. Even in genuine spiritual aspirants, very few are willing or able to attain release from existence itself, from which there is no rebirth. Okay, it's not unachievable, but most of the people, most of us are not doing that kind of a sadhana to attain complete freedom. A soul does not usually reincarnate immediately after the death of the physical body. Usually, I'm saying. There is usually an interlude of varying duration before the next rebirth. During this period, a bound soul, you can call it a jivatma, remains encased in the two bodies, causal body and the subtle body. Because the physical body has been shed during the death process. The subtle body and the causal body is left with the soul. This interlude following death and proceeding rebirth is like a prolonged state of dreaming. It's almost like the dreams which we experience while asleep in the physical body. So that's why they say that death is a longer sleep. Every day we experience this. We detach from our physical body. And the dreams are in the subtle body. The amount of time spent in the intermediate after death state depends upon the deeds and desires accumulated during the previous life. Until such time as the soul's karma has been adequately evaluated by Yam, the Lord of Death, the soul will remain suspended in the intermediate state, deeply immersed in dream-like illusion. Because we often wonder what happens when a person goes away. This is what happens. I want to talk about the process of death also, because this is something will happen to all of us. There's no escaping it. So it's good to know. Knowledge gives us peace. At the time of the death, the soul abandons its physical sheath or the gross body. When a person's physical body begins to chronically decay, either it is through old age or illness, the physical body is unable to maintain its connection with the two inner bodies. Sure, there are accidents also, but still, majority of the people, old age or illness. But during accident also, this is what happens. Physical body is a drop, but it is like a sudden drop of the physical body. Still, there's a severance though. So the physical body is unable to maintain its connection with the two inner bodies or the subtler bodies. When this connection is completely severed, the soul in the inner two bodies departs for the intermediate after death state, leaving the now lifeless physical to begin the final process of decomposition, because that's what happened to the physical body. It decomposes. And this is what we call death of the physical body. Let's look at this whole process in great detail from a yogic standpoint. We are all yoga students. So that's why I always use the terminology or the wisdom from the yogic texts. When a mortally wounded or terminally ill person begins the actual death process, first the functioning of the life energies, which we call prana, in the body become affected. The power of the prans weakens. They slowly begin to withdraw into the subtle body. So instead of feeding the physical body, they go inward. This causes the 5 organs of actions to gradually become inoperative. We are all familiar with the organs of actions, our karmendriya. Then the 5 cognitive powers of perception, the jnanendriya, they withdraw from their corresponding sense organs. Eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the taste. The dying person loses awareness of the external world. The principle of consciousness then withdraws into the subtle body. And the dying person sinks into a state of unconsciousness. So this is like a process happens. It can happen very fast or it can happen slowly. But this is what happens. After lapsing into unconsciousness, the four gross elements in the body begin to disintegrate one by one. First, the earth element loses its cohesion as organic matter, and result of that is the loss of inner body consciousness. Then the water element begins to dissipate, causing the mucous membrane to lose moisture and throat becomes dry. And after that, the fire element begins to disintegrate. The body becomes cold, losing its natural warmth. Finally, as the air element dissolves with the final exhalation of breath, the soul leaves the gross body and is carried away in the ethereal body, concluding the death process. The conditions and disembodied soul will experience in the after-death intermediate state will depend entirely upon its temperament and tendencies formed in according to the karmas which were performed. So that means the journey after that is not the same for everybody. Sure, the decomposition of the body is same, okay? But the life after death or the journey after the death could be different. A person's reactions to this post-death stage will correspond to his or her relative degree of self-culture, character, and willpower developed through the cumulative total of the actions, words, and thoughts of the earthly life. So that means the sadhana which was done by the person is helping not only when a person is living in the physical body, it's helping that sadhana. Because what do we do when we do the sadhana? We are strengthening our willpower. We are controlling our thoughts. We become the master of our mind. And all that sadhana helps us in the journey afterwards too. So that's how important it is to live a life of a sadhak, aspirant. The soul's experiences during the after-death state will either be educative or punitive, depending upon the dominance of virtues or vices cultivated during the life just over. During this intermediate state, a disembodied person remains immersed in visualization of his or her own thought forms projected into the void. Because those thoughts are there in the mind, and mind is going with us. The person considers these operational hallucinations, and which are called ghosts, to be real and alive. So in the dream state, the individual subconsciously creates to the mental imagery any type of unreal entity, godly or demonic, human or non-human, animate or inanimate, and awaits their favor or fears their wrath. So this is what happens. I mean, we go through it during our dreams. So this is what we are going through after we leave the body also. When the death process begins, many become fearful and confused because they are still, even at that late hour, deeply attached to their family, friends, and possessions. So that's why we got to learn how to cultivate this vairagya early on. Take care of all those loose ends beforehand. They know that everything has to be left behind. But because of deep habitual attachment, they are unable or unwilling to let go of their clinging to their various belongings, wherever they are. Me and mine. keeps us in fear. This creates great anguish in a person. This anguish can completely unbalance a person's sense of objectivity and discrimination. And sometimes the result of that is a panic. So this is what I'm talking about right before leaving this physical body. Under such circumstances, the person will obviously be unable to retain even a little bit of the fearless mental poise and objectivity, which is so necessary to successfully surmount the waves of the negative and positive thought forms, which are being produced from the formerly suppressed contents of the subconscious mind. That's why daily meditation, introspection, understanding of this life, why are we here, what is the purpose, is so important. As a result, with composure and stability gone, because average person is not composed, the person will be far gone for the terrifying apparitional that awaits in the after-death state. The person may visualize a mad elephant chasing him, or experience the horrifying fall into a very deep well. Where is it coming from? From the mind. Or he or she may observe the approach of a person who was his or her enemy during his earthly life, coming with a sword or taking revenge. All of these horrifying images are created and experienced entirely within the mind of the dead person. Mind. The expression of delusive and evil acts and tendencies developed during the earthly life. Such horrible phantasm appearing in uninterrupted progression, because it just happens so fast, are the reflections of mental impurities. But on the other hand, if the mind was pure, if the mind was cultivated, if there are divine thoughts in the mind, then the journey can be like your own guru is coming there to receive you. So sadhana we got to do now, because this will definitely happen. We got to leave this physical body, but how do we leave the physical body is dependent upon what kind of a sadhana we are doing. The terrifying apparitions in the after-death state can provide the disembodied individual with that is a time, very invaluable time actually. It's almost like an opportunity to resolve at an accelerated pace all the karmic debts of past lives. It's almost like when we are meditating, we can do the same thing, or when we do the yoga nidra, from our subconscious mind, all those impressions are erupting, and that is the time to clean it. But after death, it can happen extremely fast. Extremely fast. So instead of getting frightened, the individual analyzes these images with fearless objectivity to perceive their inherent unreality, because they're not real. That's why they're called ghostly, apparitional. One can see through them, destroying their power to have a psychological effect. So in this way, a person can experience these subconsciously generated thought forms without suffering their effects. Almost like when we go through this life and some bad time comes, some people suffer mentally and others don't, because of their own mental capability. So after death also happens the same way. So you can nullify your karmic debts one by one, very fast. But prior training is needed. And training is done in the earthly life. We have to learn how to develop endurance to maintain an unflinching sense of discriminative balance during this accelerated process of purification. Then the person is theoretically capable of resolving all karmic debts. This way, a person can proceed one big step towards liberation. It's not that a person is liberated, but movement can happen. It's like an accelerated movement upward, even after death. The journey after death. But discriminative detachment of this intensity remains difficult for the vast majority of people. That's why Lord Krishna said, countless people walk on this path. Very few reach there. Very few. Hardly one. Only those who trained in yoga or any kind of other discipline, while still alive on earth, have the inner resources necessary to face the experience of the death without becoming unbalanced or without getting reduced to a state of mindless panic. And we can see that in our day-to-day life. Do we get panicked very easily? Do we get terrified very easily? Or can we keep our composure? We got to reflect on our own impulses. Because in the waking state, if we are not in control, then in a dream-like state, we won't be in control. So this is the sadhana we need to do. Wrathful and terrifying apparitions are not the only types of mind creations experienced by people in the after-death intermediate state. Okay? Terrifying apparitions are the result of people's evil karmas. But everyone has done some good actions also. So along the horrors, a person occasionally delights in benevolent images also. So it all depends. If predominantly a person lived a sattvic life, then after journey will be predominantly pure. Okay. Seeking rebirth. One can theoretically remain in this after state or after death state of existence until all unresolved karmic debts are repaid. That's what the scriptures say. A person can stay like that. And why do we do that? Why will a person stay like that? To accomplish this faster purification. But this is almost impossible, or I should say next to impossible for most people. We don't want to stay alone. We don't want to be there without the gross body. We are so attached. We want to come back. And that's why this avagaman continues. Sooner or later, the unrelenting sequence of karmic visions reduces nearly everyone to a condition of terrifying misery, except those who are yogically trained. So that's why we want to be a yogi. We want to finish this journey of coming and going. With this body, we can do only physical body, do some sadhana. But we got to learn how to have a control over our mind so that we continue doing the sadhana even after death of this physical body. When an individual can no more hastens towards the world in which the individual is destined to be reborn according to the divine assessment of karmas by Lord of Death, the only way to flee from the mix of horrors and delights of the after-death state is to enter another womb. Destined womb for rebirth. That's what happens. This is invariably the fate of everyone, except a few yogis or saints or genuinely noble people. Noble people who have sharp discrimination and many, many pure actions to their credit. A person has no power to consciously choose any particular womb. Because often people say, oh, the child is choosing. No, consciously nobody is choosing. You don't have that power. Although an individual is usually reborn among people with whom the individual has karmic links from the past incarnations. That's what happens. That's why they say souls travel in groups, because karmically they are so connected with each other, so much attachment. The soul brings along the two inner bodies. You're familiar with it. These are the two inner bodies, means the subtle body and the causal body. And subtle body has 4 parts: man, buddhi, chitta, ahankar, right? And the causal body. Another thing the soul brings is the unpaid balance of the past karmas. They come back to. And another thing is unfulfilled desires. Unfulfilled desire. That's why we are all born here, because we had some unfulfilled desires from the past lives. So individual forms his or her own destiny for the coming life. If one has lived a predominantly pure sattvic life in the previous existence, a person can be directed to one of the higher heavenly worlds for the new birth. If a person maintained a predominantly sensual and passionate rajasic lifestyle, and which majority of the human beings do, a person will again return to this earthly life. But a person can descend to one of the lower worlds also. That is the hellish realm. We learned about that also last week. So predominantly a person lived a tamasic life with evil tendencies and behavior will end up in the lower realms. Upon entering the new womb for rebirth, the memories and intellectual knowledge acquired by the person in the previous life begins to fade. A person loses all conscious memory of the events and everything else pertaining to the former life. That's why we don't remember where we were in the last life. Or even our former identity. The soul becomes a different person with a fresh, unmolded identity for the coming life. The individual still carries the old legacy of the karmas, though. Desires of the former lives in the form of impressions, sanskars. These impressions form the tendencies that will subconsciously shape the course of the new life. So there's a continuity because of the karmas and the sanskars. The individual is likely to turn out to be a good or a bad person, intelligent or dim-witted, rich or poor, happy or miserable, depending upon the nature and the intensity of the impressions carried forward from previous lives to the new womb. One reaps the fruits of the past karmas and desires good as well as bad, even in the new life. At the end, let me tell you that this is what keeps us bound to the wheel of conditioned existence, which we call sansar. This our gaman is in this sansar with the help of the sanskars. This sansar rotates continuously from birth to death. So we got to pay some attention to this reality while living in this body, enjoying the benefits of our past karmas, but make sure that we accelerate our growth towards the ultimate goal also. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Visheshyate. Om Shanti 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 Om. Thank you very much for listening.